Some of you have grown up inside homes that may have looked normal from the outside, but inside you were surviving something no child should have to survive. I know this because that was me. This video is a lifeline for people who learned survival before they learned childhood. To the people who survived violence, instability, addictions in the home, emotional neglect, abandonment, a total lack of safety, or for people who are currently trying to survive this. If you have a toxic family, you may have been led to believe that there was something wrong with you or defective about your general nature. But today I want to highlight that we are all just products of our environment. And I'm deeply sorry that no one was able to provide you with the compassion needed to understand this until this point. But today, I'm going to show you why it wasn't your fault. We did not ask to be here. We did not choose to be here. Our parents chose to bring us into this world. And with that comes the responsibility of providing a life worth living. Many of us did not have that experience. We were maybe provided with the basics, food, shelter. A lot of people didn't even get that. In society today, everybody wants to chop it up to, oh, well, your parents did the best that they could with what they had. And today I'm going to be highlighting the problems in thinking this way. And I'm also going to be showing you how to protect your peace and how to break the cycle, because I did. I grew up in an environment where unpredictable violence was happening, alcoholism was present, constant instability and stress were present. I grew up in an environment where I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel seen, and in a dynamic where everything was kind of just swept under the rug. It was never talked about, it was never addressed, and I was just kind of expected to carry on with life as normal. I'm not telling this story today for sympathy. I'm telling this story because I made it out and I became the person that I would have needed when I was younger. And if I can do that, you can too. So I began to understand that my family was maybe not normal once I started being at the age of spending a lot of time at, friends' house, having sleepovers, spending time with their family. Probably in early elementary is when I started to witness the contrast. This was deeply isolating and honestly devastating as a child because you don't really have the mental capacity to understand, why is my home so different than this? I would compare my family to my childhood friendships family, and I was very embarrassed by my family dynamic, honestly. I wanted to understand why there was such a deep contrast between what their normal was versus my normal. But it's kind of difficult as a child to even begin to start considering something like this. But I knew deep down that my family dynamic and my home life was absolutely not normal, especially in comparison to my friends and what their family was like. The patterns in my household were alcoholism, emotional neglect, violence, volatility, adversity, and a lot of very big traumatic events, blow-ups, and things that I was exposed to as a child that were never properly addressed. I learned that something devastatingly traumatic could happen, and then my family would just kind of recalibrate and move forward as if nothing had happened or if it was completely normal. And I was kind of just expected to cope with some of the things that I had grown up seeing and hearing. Looking back, I began to remember how many times Child Protective Services had visited me at my public schools and privately outside of my family home, which was obviously to the result of probably my friends' parents at the time, who were concerned maybe about my behavior as a child, but could also kind of pinpoint or dictate that something wasn't quite right with my at-home dynamic. As a child, I didn't really realize why these people were here or why they were talking to me, and of course I just told them that everything was normal and there was nothing to be worried about, because in my mind, everything was normal. That was my normal. I didn't realize how unsafe I felt as a child. I didn't realize that it's not normal to constantly be analyzing everybody's moods and energy 24/7 as a child. I didn't understand that it's not normal to feel in the position of being the regulator of a home as a child. Before I get into some of the negative ways that this ultimately shaped me, I do want to touch on some of the positive things. That hypervigilance turned into razor sharp intuition. All of the experiences that I went through turned me into a deeply compassionate and understanding person. Growing up in this type of environment naturally created me to be somebody who loves to help people. I have a deep desire and deep passion to help others, to provide guidance, honesty, truth. It's a big reason why I started this YouTube channel. I am incredible at giving advice. I always have been ever since I was a child. I've kind of always been the one, no matter what the situation, that people come to for advice. Not really the other way around, but I tend to be the safe space and place that people come to for consulting or guidance in most of my friendships, most of my life. Growing up in this type of environment gave me amazing strength and resilience. I genuinely feel like there is nothing that I can't handle, that I can't overcome, and that I can't conquer because of surviving this type of situation. I had every reason to collapse beneath these dysfunctional conditions, but ultimately I built myself from this. I became the adult that I needed as a child. I grew to be the adult that gave myself everything I didn't have as a child. And you can too. Another generally positive attribute that grew from this environment is my ambition. My ambition has always ran incredibly deep within me. And I'm finally at a point where I can recognize that this ambition was the justice for my inner child. I wasn't made to fit into my family. I was made to break that cycle and break that pattern. The girl who used to have to read the energy in the room is now the girl teaching boundaries. Emotional intelligence, resilience, compassion, intuition. These are all superpowers that have now been developed within me from these adaptations. I was a parentified child. What does this mean? There's two styles of parentification. Instrumental, meaning you take on adult responsibilities as a child, and emotional. You become the emotional parent to your parents. I was personally faced with both of these types of parentification. A child is supposed to play and relax. I was constantly analyzing my environment, and I was the emotional regulator of my home. Basically, my nervous system never shut off, never got a break. I learned hypervigilance because I learned that I have to keep myself safe. Even though that was the adult's job in my home, I felt that I needed to be responsible for my own safety as a young child. I tried to mentally hold everything together, keep everybody's moods regulated so that something bad didn't happen. I tried to mentally hold everybody together emotional labor a child should never be doing. Kids run to their parents when they're emotional, scared, overwhelmed, for comfort and for safety. I learned to soothe myself through fantasy, daydreaming, and ultimately dissociation. Parentified children grow up really, really fast because when they're supposed to be learning confidence, self-esteem, boundaries, and self-expression, they're learning how to not upset an unstable parent, how to anticipate disaster, how to carry adult pressure, and how to minimize your own needs in order to not disrupt the dysfunctional environment any further. Children are not supposed to carry the emotional well-being of their parents. The parentified child does this every single day. As I began growing into adolescence, this is my scapegoat era in my family. I was 100% the scapegoat in my family. As I grew, I began to act out and be insanely rebellious. My parents were shocked and confused as to why this was happening and were completely ignorant to the fact that I was clearly just a product of my environment. I was criticized, ridiculed, shunned by other members of my family, constantly being asked why I always wanted to be at friends' house, why I never spent any time at home or with my family, when it was obvious I just wanted to escape their dysfunctional environment. In this video, I want to highlight the severity of the effects that your childhood home and how you were raised have on you in your adult life, and how it shapes you, how you operate, how you think, how your life turns out. A lot of people raised in these environments, they don't have dreams, they don't have goals. The only thing they want is an environment where they feel safe. As a child, you're subjected to the beliefs, moods, and general mental atmosphere of your home. Anxieties, superstitions, religions, all of your parents' convictions were impressed into your mind. For example, if a child is brought up in a poverty-stricken home where they were constantly exposed to lack and limitation, you could say that this child was conditioned to poverty. Although somebody can have a poverty complex based on early childhood experiences, training, and beliefs, of course, they can become adults who rise above this. The point of me pointing this out is to highlight how your childhood home absolutely affects and shapes who you end up becoming. People with lack and negative mindsets project constantly. It may be a subconscious thing, they're not aware that they're doing it, but this absolutely has an effect on the development of your mind and how you come to know the world and how you come to see it. Why is it that people can always understand, oh, it's not a bad dog, it's a bad owner, or no bad dogs, only bad owners? Why is the same psychology not applied to children? Why? Why can people understand that a dog's behavior is absolutely relevant and related to its owner, but not from parent to child? I want you to know that you were born a perfect and sentient being. There is nothing that you did wrong to develop disruption in your mind. There is nothing that you did wrong or bad. We naturally adapt to the environment that we are exposed to. We live in a generation where sane people go to psychologists to deal with their experiences with sick ones. A child needs to be born into a safe environment where they're able to explore who he or she is. This means an environment which allows them to laugh, play, and fully express themselves and discover themselves. If a child grows up in an unstable environment where they're constantly stressed, this is going to become an adult with an unstable sense of self. Instead of exploring and self-discovery, the child is learning how to survive and navigate adult situations with no proper support and no guidance of what this should look like. Sentiment value is not ingrained into children who are raised in these types of environments. They don't know how to use their voice because they were taught all their life to be a people pleaser. These children grow up not understanding their value, their self-worth. They have no sense of self-esteem. They don't know how to take care of themselves properly. These people grow up insecure, unsure of themselves, and often believing life has to be a struggle because that's all they've ever known. I really never learned to protect my peace or have a strong sense of self until I became an adult. When I was 19 years old, I moved to a completely different city, away from my family, away from the environment I was always raised in. And it wasn't until about a year after that point that my body finally relaxed enough to process what had actually happened in my early adolescence and childhood. I began to really think about and process properly all the things that I had been through and how not normal it actually was and how not okay it actually was. I was finally away from that environment, and that was the only thing that allowed me to regulate and stabilize myself enough to have these realizations. The hardest thing for me to accept as an adult was the understanding that I did deserve better and that my parents didn't do their best. They actually neglected the responsibility to prepare a human being for life because of everything else that took of greater importance of that at the time. I didn't feel that they honored the role that they had of being the first role models in my life and the first example of what to be in this world, how to operate. It was very hard for me to accept that although there was knowledge accessible, they chose to busy themselves with other things, prioritize other things, and just hope that I figured it out. Thank God that I did, right? I have lived through many things that a lot of adults never recover from, so that I could be a lifeline to people like me, and so that I could become the person that I would have needed. What I want to say to the person who is watching this and currently living inside of a home like this, hold on. Just hold on. The more you gain independence, the better your life will get. And eventually, you will create the space for yourself to become the person that you're meant to become and to flourish in the ways that you were meant to flourish. You'll be able to provide yourself the safety and the nervous system regulation that wasn't provided to you. Just hold on. And know that this wasn't fair. Know that you didn't deserve to go through this, that you deserved better. You deserved better preparation for life. You deserved a safe environment. You deserved an environment where you could thrive in, where you could become in. And not everybody has the luxury of being born into an environment like that. But that's not to say you will never have the opportunity to become the person that you want to become. Just hold on. Do the best you can to keep yourself safe. Give yourself space if you can. Whether that's being at the library, being at a friend's house, being in your room, try to create your own safe space as much as you can. And stop making excuses for people who should have taken better care of you and shouldn't have hurt you like that. Because you don't need to do that just because they're your parents. You came into this world a perfect, beautiful child. Their most important responsibility was to provide you with the stability of an environment that allowed you to flourish into who you are meant to become without needing to escape. If you didn't get that luxury, it's not because you didn't deserve it, because you did and you do. And there's no excuse that you should have to accept for neglecting to get that, for not having the luxury of getting that. You didn't deserve that environment. You deserved an environment that made you feel safe, that offered you stability, and that gave you the freedom to grow into who you were meant to become from birth, not after you escape the toxic family cycle. No. I want the person who is watching this video and currently struggling in a toxic home to feel that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I want you to start feeling and accepting your own self-worth. I want you to start feeling worthy of setting boundaries for yourself and sticking up for yourself and not making excuses for behavior that's not okay. Being born into a toxic environment does not mean there isn't a beautiful life out there waiting for you. It's not about where you start, baby. It's about where you finish, and I'm living proof of that. Sometimes you have to start over with nothing and nobody, and that's not fair, but sometimes that's the healthiest decision for you if the people around you are toxic. I detached from my family's behavior the moment I started to understand and accept that it was never about me. It was about them being too caught up in their own head and the things that they have been through, and the inability and unwillingness to face themselves. It was never about me. It was about their unhealed wounds. I had to accept that they had a lack of preparation when it came to parenting. They were not intentional about my existence and who I would become. But that doesn't mean that you won't be. If you're watching this video and you're feeling like I need to detach from my toxic family cycle, be prepared to feel a little bit of guilt. Detaching is not betrayal, it's protection, it's self-preservation. It's over for parents who want to blame their children as if they just came out like that and they weren't directly responsible for that child's development in their early years. Imagine not being a good parent so you just raise your kids to believe that they're inherently bad and troubled. It's not okay, and it's not normal to completely destroy the brain development of your own child because you don't want to do the work that it takes to be the parent that they deserve. If you're feeling guilty from pulling away from your toxic family, I hope that this story will give you some hope, because it's the best thing that I ever did, not just for myself, but also for my family dynamic. A few years ago, I completely removed access to myself from my parents. I didn't speak to them for 2 years. I went completely no contact when I realized they weren't ready to receive the realities about what I had went through growing up and how it shaped me into the person that I had become. They were not ready to receive the truth. They still looked at me as a child and not as the adult that I had become that advocates for themselves. Doing their best wasn't an excuse I was willing to accept anymore. I didn't expect them to rewrite the past, but I did expect them to be accountable. After 2 years, they were ready to sit down and listen. I made them sit down with me and a counselor, and I laid new ground rules for how I expected to be treated and what I would not accept. I set new regulations and guidelines of how this relationship was going to work, and I did it with the counselor present because I didn't feel safe to do it on my own, just based on how things had gone in the past. And let me tell you, this is the best thing I could have ever done. Not just for me, not just for my inner child, but also for them. My relationship with my parents is better than it has ever been before in my life. Although I felt sad and I felt guilty for pulling away from them, this forced accountability upon them and to face things that they had been avoiding their entire life. I forced them to understand that I'm a human being whose perspective and experience deserve to be held as worthy as their own. I made them understand that it was their responsibility to shape me into the healthiest and most successful version of myself that they could have possibly done. I let them know that I would no longer be fulfilling the role of the problematic child. And if they were not able to look at themselves, I would not be able to have a relationship with them. I forced them to understand that I was a product of the environment that they raised me in. And if they wanted my forgiveness, it was going to come through acts of repair, not through words and apologies. I forced them to understand that I had become an adult who demands respect and will not accept less from any relationships in my life. Although it was nothing that they helped me to become, that was who they were dealing with. And let me tell you, my family dynamic has never been healthier. I have never had a closer or better relationship with my parents. Pulling away and demanding reparation and respect is the best thing I could have ever done, not just for my inner child, but also for them and for their growth. My family dynamic is now healthier because I changed the pattern. If you are trapped in a toxic household or you are trapped in a toxic environment, I want to provide you with practical tools that you can take from this video and use to have a better quality of life no matter where you're at right now. Number 1 is stop blaming yourself. Understand your innate worth and start demanding that people respect it. The next thing I want you to do is to create space for yourself, whether that's with friends, in extracurricular activities, in hobbies, or in your room. Create space for yourself that's sacred. Get distance wherever you can, whether that's through friend's house, through other family members, at the gym, or even just in your room. Separate yourself from the toxicity. Separate yourself physically and emotionally. Start establishing your self-worth. Being raised in toxic environments can completely diminish your self-esteem and your self-worth. Start to understand the innate value you have just by being born and start to reclaim your confidence. Learn to regulate your nervous system. This will help you so much, and create boundaries for yourself and stand on them when it's safe. If nobody told you this before, you deserve better. You were worthy the moment that you were born, and the rest of your life does not need to look like the house that you grew up in. If this touched you, you are not alone. I survived it, and I promise you that you can create a life that feels safe and fulfilling. But not only that, you can create and you can have the life of your dreams. I love you. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.